You're watching PCTV Channel 17, proudly serving the Port Clinton City School District community. The following is a production of the Port Clinton High School Digital Media class.
Welcome to Time for Health. I'm your host, Rachel Fall, and we're very glad you've joined us. We hope you gain something from the program that helps you and your loved ones. We want to arm everyone with as much information as possible so we can all make good choices. And this is not to take the place of regular medical care, so be sure to include your healthcare provider in on your plans and your conversations. And today our topic is concussions, and our guest is Jen Caligari. Thank you for being here.
No problem.
I'm not going to get into all the letters after your name. I'm going to let you go into how do you get to be a little bit of an expert on concussions.
So the letters behind my name are certified and licensed athletic trainer. So I work with a lot of high school sports teams. I'm also a licensed massage therapist, and I'm also an impact trained athletic trainer, which means I just took a really long continuing ed class that specializes in concussions, how to treat, how to recognize them, and all of that stuff.
Gotcha. So that's how you got to be where you are now. So when I think of concussions, I think of like Muhammad Ali, or I think of like football, big bad football injury. Yep. So what really is a concussion?
So a concussion is also called a traumatic brain injury. Okay. There are more brain injuries than just concussions, but that's the one everybody knows. And it's any traumatic hit to the head where the brain moves. Okay. So it can go forward and back, or it can go side to side. Okay. Any big hit or a bunch of small hits can cause concussions.
Okay. So it doesn't have to be the big wham of a football hit or something like that.
Doesn't have to be the football tackle.
Lots of little bams along the way. So how is it diagnosed, or how do you know for sure if that's what it is?
So we try to tell people the common signs and symptoms. Okay. So if you notice someone has fallen down or has taken a really big football hit or has been in a car accident, anything like that, there's things to watch for. If you start getting a lot of these symptoms and signs, then go seek medical care, medical attention for a possible concussion.
Okay, and they can do some...
Yep, and then they can do a full diagnostic testing and fully evaluate everything to determine if you have one or not.
Okay. Now, I keep saying like football and boxing, but it very much is not just about that. You said falling. You even mentioned some sports where typically you wouldn't think you would get a concussion.
Yes. So
also for older adults as well.
Yep, older adults, trips and falls up the stairs, unbalance, anything from getting your foot stuck in a blanket and falling can cause a concussion. Cross-country athletes can slip and fall. Tennis players can get hit by their partner or trip and fall. Any of those things can cause a concussion. Car accidents, typically seen with the whiplash from the forward and back or the side-to-side motion. So anything really could cause a concussion.
Or some kind of brain injury like that. Okay. How common is it? Does it happen a lot, a little?
So the CDC research that we looked up for the most recent numbers from 2015 was 2.5 million ER visits for 2015. And those were probably not all diagnosed concussions. Those were some kind of traumatic brain injury.
Those are the people that actually went to the ER.
Yep.
There's probably lots
that didn't know they had them.
Right. So it's a pretty big issue, and again, it's not just for football players or boxers. Or
anybody and everybody.
Okay. And so it happens when your head is jarred in some fashion, like you said, forward or backward.
Yep. So your brain floats inside your head. So anything that can cause that brain to move and hit the skull. Okay. So that's where you see it in car accidents a lot, because people will actually slam forward and then back, or if you're hit from the side, it would be side to side. Okay. But a trip and fall can do the same thing, just at a lower speed.
Gotcha.
So if you're an older adult that doesn't have good balance and you're constantly tripping and falling, you can have little motions
That's one of those
all the
tricky
times.
kids,
Yep.
small ones.
And they can add up to create a bigger
Okay.
problem.
What are some of those signs and symptoms that people should be aware of?
The most common ones that you'll see are they're dazed and confused. We always tell people if they're oriented to person, place, and time. So do they know who they are? Do they know where they are? And they don't have to know the specific time of day,
Okay.
but do they know day of the week? Do they know it's around lunchtime? Do they know if it's morning or evening? You don't have to have them say it's 1:02 in the afternoon.
Gotcha.
And then day of the week, Saturday morning, I'm at my daughter's house. If you have more than one, which daughter's house?
Gotcha.
Football players, I'm on the football field. Which one? Your field or somebody else's
Right,
field?
okay.
So just really, do they know where they're at?
Okay.
Do they recognize people around them?
Okay.
And are they quick to respond, or do they take a while to think about answers? That's the biggest one that's easiest to determine.
Okay.
They could be unstable, unsteady.
Okay.
They could think the room is spinning. They could be sensitive to light, sensitive to noise. And we have big ones that we tell people that as soon as you notice these, don't walk, drive quickly, call the ambulance, and get help if there's any loss of consciousness whatsoever.
Okay.
If there's any throwing up or vomiting.
Okay.
Even if it's not immediately, if it's a couple hours afterwards, you need to go quickly. And any amnesia or not remembering anything.
Okay.
They don't know who they are. They don't know who you are. They don't know where they're at.
It's a red flag, not a yellow flag.
Yeah, a red flag. Get medical treatment quickly, closest emergency room to you,
Okay.
not the neighbor down the street to help you.
Right. Okay.
So,
Right away.
right away.
Okay. So these are the signs to look for: dazed and confused. Now, I have heard you speak before, and you said it's important to know how the person functions normally.
Yep.
So if you're dealing with maybe an older person who has some memory loss, look for some of the other signs and symptoms because
That's why it's easier when people around you all the time are there when it happens. Because if I'm seeing someone for the first time and I've never met you before, you may not know numbers. And so I'm asking you to remember 3 numbers. Well, you may not remember those anyway.
Gotcha.
If I don't know that you are very meticulous and in your answers and you think for a long time before you answer anything, I may think that's a concussion symptom.
Gotcha.
If you can't balance on one foot anyway, then I may think that's a concussion symptom instead of you've sprained your ankle 20 times since you were a kid. So if you have any other underlying conditions, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, any of that stuff could, for me, having no history, think that those are concussion symptoms instead.
Okay. So kind of knowing the person ahead of time and what to watch, what
Yep.
to ask.
What's
that kind of
normal
stuff.
for them.
So asking a person, the person, place, and time things, are they unbalanced? Certainly if they're vomiting or if they lose consciousness. But those don't have to necessarily, certainly don't all have to be
No.
there.
And you don't have to have all 20 or 30 or whatever
Right.
symptoms to have a concussion. It can be a milder concussion that you just have a slight headache and you're sensitive to light. You could have one of those red flags and you could have lost consciousness and could be vomiting. It's still a traumatic injury to the brain, just the treatment plan
Gotcha.
would be different.
Okay.
So a mild, there's not really grades anymore. You used to
Okay.
hear a grade 1, grade 2, grade
Okay.
3 concussion. They don't grade them anymore. Every once in a while you'll hear people say moderate or mild or severe. That usually means how long it takes to resolve.
Gotcha.
A mild concussion won't last for 6 months.
Okay.
That would be looking at more the severe symptoms because you're waiting for all of those effects to resolve.
So we don't want to get one to begin with. What are common tips to sort of take care of your head or prevent?
Well, I mean, really, everyone who's afraid to play football. Not playing football doesn't mean you won't get a concussion.
Right.
Um,
Trip in a blanket.
Yeah, trip in a blanket and you can fall. But just be aware. There's not really a good way to prevent all.
Right. 'Cause a lot of them are accidents.
It's accidents. You tripped and fell. You didn't mean to run into something. You didn't mean to get into a car accident. You didn't mean to headbutt your little brother while you were playing. But just be aware of it and get treatment for it is really the best thing you can do.
Okay. Now, there are a lot of things that have changed with sports. Talk a little bit about that, how things have changed.
So because of all of the NFL and professional athletes coming back and doing the autopsies after they've died, and you see their brains and all of these things, there's been regulations put into place. And so most commonly, things start at the NCAA level, and they kind of trickle down. They fight the battles with all the legal money and everything, and then the high schools can kind of adopt them a little easier, and then youth sports just kind of follow suit. So NCAA regulations, athletes have to disclose how many concussions they've had to the medical staff whenever they start playing or whenever they're accepted and come to camp. That medical staff determines if they're eligible. If you've had too many concussions, they may disqualify you. And there's no magic number. It tends to be 3. They start to request more testing just for your safety. But it could be as many as 7 or 8 depending on the person. And a lot of concussions aren't diagnosed. So it is hard to make that hard determination. They do baseline testing before the season so they know how they are before they get an accident. And whether it's a computer test, whether it's a balance test, there's a bunch of tools that are available to medical staff and athletic trainers that they can. There's always an education aspect. They always have a concussion seminar. They have to sign that they understand what it is, how they can get it, that they have to report it if they have one, and that they're also responsible for reporting on teammates. So that if someone is hiding it, the teammate has to report
if somebody got a scholarship to play a sport, they might not be super willing to set up the...
So a lot of it is, and it's not trying to tattletale. It really is for your overall well-being. We don't want you to not know who you are or have memory issues when you're in your 40s and 50s.
Trying to hold down a job.
Because you had concussions just so that you could get a college education. And so those are kind of the basics. You see now with the NFL, they have the extra athletic trainer up in the box to review hits later. That hasn't made it further down yet, but you never know.
So all that stuff kind of trickles down.
Trickles down.
There are mandatory meetings, I think.
So for high school athletes here in Ohio, High School Activities Association mandates that the parents and the athletes attend a meeting every season, and they're aware of what a concussion is. They have to sign a waiver. They're supposed to report concussions to a coach, a teacher, or a medical professional. Not all high schools have athletic trainers. So you can't just say you have to report to the athletic trainer. And then the parents are also responsible for reporting if they feel that there's an issue.
They see some symptoms afterwards.
And they can report to a primary care physician instead of going directly to the school if they wish. Youth athletics has the same thing, but very few of them have medical staff on site. So you have to report to the coach or a responsible adult.
So lots of changes to kind of make sure people are
try to put the
themselves.
topic out so people know what it is now.
Awesome. We are going to take a quick break, and we will be right back talking more about concussions. talking about concussions, kind of talked about what they are, which is not necessarily always just sports related. It's some kind of brain injury, whacking your head good and hard.
Yep.
Talked about the signs and symptoms to look for, dizziness, kind of not necessarily knowing their surroundings, being a little slow on the draw kind of stuff, or certainly loss of consciousness, vomiting. Those are red flags. Get help right away.
Yep.
So whether it's severe and you go to the ER, or it's maybe not quite so severe but you're noticing some things and you go to seek medical help, what happens? They do some tests?
Yeah, so if you're going to the emergency room, most likely with a traumatic hit, they're going to do a CT scan to see if there's a brain bleed. And that's those red flags are that you've hit it hard enough for it to start bleeding.
Okay.
So sometimes you can hit yourself and get a bruise, other times you just hit yourself and nothing happens. It's the same way with the brain.
Okay.
So sometimes they'll do a CT scan, not all the time.
Okay.
And then other times they'll ask you to stand on one foot and balance. They'll ask you to focus on an eye chart and read it backwards or diagonals or something like that. They'll ask you to try and walk a straight line, stand with your feet together, just depending on what symptoms you're showing.
Okay.
Would be how they're testing your responsibility. And there's over 100 tools that certified athletic trainers and other health professionals can use to get a really accurate reading on what the problems are and what needs to be taken care of. So the first step to treating it is usually rest for a short period of time. Current research is showing that a balance between rest and slight physical activity are optimal.
Okay.
But especially when you have younger kids who want to get back to sports and or even adults who don't have time to take off and have kids at home, and you have to be very careful that the light physical activity is light and doesn't go straight into I'm back to my normal life.
Gotcha.
So usually we ask that you try to rest and let your concussion symptoms control how much you do. So if headache is your biggest symptom, you can do an activity, fold laundry, watch TV, take your kids to a soccer game, as long as that headache is manageable without medicine. If your head's killing you, you're getting double vision, a lot of your concussion symptoms are being made worse and unbearable from what you're doing. Stop what you're doing.
Right. Back to step one.
Go back to step one. It sounds like common sense, but we're in such a fast-paced world that nobody wants to take time off.
Some Advil and I'll just keep going. I'm sure it'll be
Yep.
fine.
And there's no research that shows Advil or Tylenol or anything will help or hurt. But if you're masking the symptoms, you're not really healing. You're just covering them up.
So the headache is the alarm that something's not right in your body.
Yeah, a headache, or my eyes are hurting, my ears are ringing, I'm starting to get sick to my stomach, I can't walk in a coordinated fashion anymore, whatever your symptom happens to be. So once you've rested and you've taken the days off work, or you've gotten a doctor's excuse not to go to school for a day or two, the next step is to start doing something, but in small doses. Don't go back to work the full day. Don't go back to school the full day. Go to 1 or 2 classes. Go into work and do one small task. If you have a physical job, you're doing desk duty instead.
Gotcha.
Don't stare at a computer all day.
I was just going to say, when you say rest, a lot of people rest with technology.
Nope. Technology actually a lot of times makes the symptoms worse. Teenagers texting in the dark. Mom told me I had to go lay down. I'm bored. I'm not tired. I'm going to stare at a very small screen with a light behind it and text my friends, or be on YouTube, or Snapchat people.
Right.
And that will make it worse. So if you want to watch movies, watch something you've already seen so that you can close your eyes and listen. Don't play video games. Fast action movies where stuff on the screen moves quickly.
Okay.
Loud music, stuff with a lot of bass could bother you.
Okay.
Don't listen to classical if you hate it.
Right.
But turn the bass down, turn the volume down. Don't check your email.
So rest means
Sleep.
serious rest.
Yes, sleep. Take the time to actually rest.
Right.
And as much as possible, try to shut the brain down.
Right.
Don't be thinking mom's at home. Don't make the grocery list and stress about having to pay the bills.
Right.
That'll just stimulate the brain and make it worse. It's hard to do,
Right.
but it is possible.
So then you can kind of progress to the light activity, like light exercise, even light household
Step
work.
2, we ask to kind of start walking around the house. We ask most of the time not to drive until your reflexes are back to normal.
Okay.
People don't think about that, but reading the signs and watching things move quickly,
Yeah.
if those are your symptoms, could make it worse. So walk around the house. If that's something you've been doing during that rest stage, then start to do 15 to 20 minute increments. Nothing to break a sweat, but enough to get the blood flowing. After that, you're back to work full day,
Right.
unless it's a physical job. Students are back to school a full day, maybe not caught up on all their work,
Right.
but at least back to school, sitting in the classroom all day, not in PE,
Right.
maybe not in band,
Okay.
but at least they've appeared for the whole day.
Going to class.
Going to classes, lectures in class aren't really hurting their heads. Then they would start the step 3, which is 30 to 45 minutes of physical activity, a more moderate pace, a little breaking a sweat, getting their heart rate up, starting to jog around a track or in a gym where they have to turn around and come back. If you're a physical labor job, this is the same thing you would be doing. You would be going to the gym, walking on a treadmill, walking outside on the track at the high school. Then after that is normal, you would start to get to 80 to 90% effort. Really working up a sweat, still a lot of cardio, 45 minutes to an hour of cardio, making sure that you can really get the blood flow going and these symptoms not come up. For athletes, their next thing would be a non-contact practice.
Okay.
So if they're a tennis athlete, that's a normal practice. If they're lacrosse or football, that's maybe a helmet but no pads.
Gotcha.
They have a red shirt on, nobody can touch them, but they can run through their position. And then their final step for an athlete would be full return to contact and practice, and then a full game.
Okay.
And then that full return to practice is normally when those labor-intensive jobs can go back to work.
Okay.
That would be a half day at work and then a full day at work to make sure that they're not having any of these symptoms come back up.
And along the way, if I get to the 30 to 45 of physical activity and that my headaches start to get worse or whatever,
You start back over at step 1.
back to rest.
Yep. So if you're on step 5 and you're returning to football practice or you're returning to a half day of physical work and you get sick that day or your head's killing you, back to step 1 and you have to
Because
start
your
all
head's
over
telling
again.
You, I'm not healed yet.
Yep. Those symptoms are your warning signs. And that's kind of why we discourage medication,
Because you don't know.
because if you're masking them, you don't catch the signals that the brain's trying to send you.
And I remember when you were talking at the luncheon that we did about physical activity, when you start to exercise a little bit, that it's just walking, like even not even yoga, because
No,
you're
changing
your
positions.
position and that
Yep.
kind of
The elliptical, you're bouncing the whole time. That's not the best first thing to do. Yoga, you would get to closer to that step 4, returning to work, returning to practice, changing your head quickly. If you're exercising and someone calls your name and that gives you a symptom, then you have to start over.
Gotcha.
Because that's a normal activity.
Right.
If you're driving and you have to check your blind spot, you don't go like this. You have to turn around quickly
Right.
to check your blind spot. So we do those activities every day. We just don't realize it
Right.
until we can't
You
do
can't
them
do it.
anymore. So
it's a lengthy process, kind of depending on the nature of the concussion or the severity of
yeah, I mean, your symptoms are going to be different than my symptoms.
Okay.
And some people are going to have more problems with balance and have to go see specialists.
Okay.
Or emotions are going to be an issue, and they're going to need to go see a psychologist or a neuropsychologist, because maybe they start crying when they turn their head.
Okay.
And it all depends on where you get hit and what speed.
Okay.
So everybody's concussion is different,
Right.
but there are specialties that are trained to help
take care of it.
no matter what the symptoms are.
Okay. Now, what about some of the long-term effects, like for people who have had multiple concussions or?
So once you have one, you are more likely to get another one. Even if you didn't know you had one,
Okay.
you didn't notice that you were maybe a little out of it, and you didn't have someone close to you. College student who lives by themselves, has no roommates. Didn't realize that they slept the entire Sunday away. That's kind of normal for college students
right.
every once in a while. So if they didn't realize they had one, and then they go and get into a car accident, that one is going to be worse
Gotcha.
than the one they didn't know they had.
Fine.
You're more susceptible, and typically each one stacked on top takes longer
Okay.
to heal
Gotcha.
because it's a lighter hit and tends to be worse symptoms and a longer recovery. Normal, which we say very, carefully,
Right.
is somewhere between a week to 2 weeks
Okay.
for a normal concussion.
Okay.
Anything longer than that, you should be following up with your doctor, your athletic trainer if you're at school, maybe seeing a physical therapist to help you with balance stuff. Anything longer than that that's untreated, you're looking at having post-concussive syndrome, which could potentially be those long-term damaging side effects seen in those NFL autopsies.
Gotcha.
Early Alzheimer's and early Parkinson's, and they don't have any clue who they are, and their brains are pretty much mush on autopsy. Anything longer than that that's untreated
Gotcha.
could lead to those permanent problems.
Gotcha. So that's why it's so important to pay attention, even though it's inconvenient and
Yes.
it puts a wrench in things.
Yep. But
Attention to that.
and even if you don't want to go immediately, those red flags are immediate.
Right.
A headache you can keep an eye on for about 24 hours.
Gotcha.
If that resting isn't helping at home, you definitely need to make an appointment. Most primary care physicians can get you in fairly quickly.
Right.
If not, there's always the urgent care option,
Right.
because at least that gets you a note for
front of
school
somebody.
or a note for work, and then you can schedule that appointment for a couple days later with your primary care physician
Right.
instead. So there's always an option. Oh, I have to go to work tomorrow. Well, go to urgent care, and you have a note for your employer.
Right.
You have a note to excuse the absence from school.
Gotcha.
And then you can kind of keep an eye on it and get in with your primary care physician.
We are about to wrap up. Any final thoughts? Any words of wisdom or?
I mean, mostly don't be scared of them. I mean, it sounds like a really big deal.
Right.
But, some people are going to use this to say, oh, my kid's never playing football again.
Right.
But athletic trainer, a few years of experience, I've had almost every athlete I've worked with concussions. Golfers, cross-country kids, swimmers. So it can happen to anybody.
Right.
Just be aware, educate your kids, have your kids pay attention to their friends. And then just open lines of communication is the best thing when you're dealing with teenagers or college athletes.
Right.
And then keep an eye on your loved ones, your spouse, your parents, your siblings.
Gotcha.
Anything to at least be aware
Right.
that they need treatment.
Something might be going on. Awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
All right, we're going to take another break and we'll be right back. And we're back. I want to thank Jen for being our guest today, learning a lot about concussions, brain injuries, the signs and symptoms, where to go to get help, and what happens for treatment. If you have questions, you can call Jen in the Lake Erie Sports Medicine Therapy Department at Magruder. It's 419-734-3131, extension 3475. Great topic, lots of information, and like she said, just knowing the signs, paying attention to family and loved ones, their normal function, noting when maybe something isn't quite right. So if you ever have feedback about a program or a suggestion for a future episode, please let us know by sending a note to Time for Health, 615 Fulton Street, Port Clinton, Ohio, 43452, or you can email Mrs. Pelz at the high school, cpelz@pccsd-k12.net. So think about something you learned today for yourself, for somebody you know and love. Share that information. And until we meet again, I encourage you to make time for health.